if we're not connected to ourselves and each other, then why are we doing the things we do? Like, what other point really is there?
Welcome to The Shift, where we search for ways to do better by thinking better.
Whether you're going through a major life change, looking to deepen your understanding of yourself, or hoping to improve your relationships with others, The Shift is here for you.
We're your hosts, Isla and Yashar, an endlessly curious sister and brother team.
As certified brain-based executive coaches with backgrounds in medicine and management, we combine the neurosciences, performance psychology, strategic planning methodology, and mindfulness techniques to empower your transformation from the inside out.
Join us in conversation as we explore better ways to show up for ourselves and each other. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Shift. Today, we are looking under the hood to see who are these humans talking to you. And today on the spotlight is going to be our one and only Yashar. Hi, Yash.
Hey, I'm excited for this conversation.
He says excited. He means other words. What do you really feel? How do you feel about me interviewing you today?
I was excited until we had a lot of technical glitches, which I think it's really apropos for what this podcast is all about, is kind of like meeting the challenge at hand. And I think you did a good job helping me like kind of shake that out and get refocused.
Shift, if I may. Did I help you shift, Yash?
Yes. Today was your job coaching me. So you helped me shift so I can get back to what's important and leave the things that I can't control in the rearview mirror.
I love it. Okay. So why we're doing these episodes is because we're talking to you every week, and we thought maybe take an episode or two, because there's two of us, to kind of give you a better understanding of who we actually are. Who are these two humans, these siblings? Talking to you, where do they come from? What's their kind of stance on philosophy and all this work we're doing? And we thought you would get a better sense of us. Obviously, if there's a question you have for us that we don't answer on this podcast, ask us, feel free to email us at at mindshiftleadership.com or DM us on Instagram. However you would like to reach out to us, please do, because we will be happy to answer your questions. But this is a little bit about us, and we're going to start with Yashar today. So the first question I want to know is, can you describe yourself to us without using all the resume words? Who is Yashar?
Yeah. I really appreciate this question, because even as I don't know, short as 5 years ago, if someone asked me this question, I would really struggle to come off the paper and not just read off the accomplishments. But I would say easily and kind of jokingly, 80% of me is someone who's just incredibly curious. I'm always questioning things. Whenever something comes up for me, I want to know more about it, or I want to learn more about it, and I want to go beyond just the superficial. Part of the reason why we're doing this podcast is because you bring up questions, you bring up ideas, and I love asking more about it. And so I think that's a huge part of me. To refine that a little bit more, I would say it's really, though, to get to the bottom line of things of when it comes to human connection. I want to really know how I can show up, and how I can show up as the best version of myself, how I can show up as a version of me that I'm proud of, but also then connect the people around me as that version of me, and to help others do the same. And there's a whole kind of lineage of education that brought me to that point, with athletics and with health and with performance. So that's a big chunk of who I am, what I think about daily. That's what I say, the 80% of me. But really, there's a 20% that's left that all I really want to do is go live on a deserted island with a bunch of animals and just kind of bask in the sun and surf and not worry about any of those questions I just mentioned. And those are probably the moments when I'm a little bit more tired and just need to ground myself and regroup and remind myself that, why I'm doing the work I am.
Okay, so I'm going to stay there for a while, because obviously I know you really well. And I think it's such an amazing answer, and I want to dig into it a little deeper. So I would say the 80%, 20% makes sense to me, but I would almost go deeper in the sense that 80%, that curious soul that you are, I think it's so great to look at you in this way, because I also know when you are hindered from being curious, when you are hindered from asking questions, sometimes controversial questions, sometimes looking under the hood or asking the opposite, it literally restricts your life. Like, you are not able to be Yashar without being curious. If I took that away from you, you would disintegrate. And I think the most like conflicts and challenges you've had in your life is not being able to ask questions, whether it's at a dinner table or on a stage or, on a social platform. Like, the moment you're restricted from being curious, your human light, your inner purpose, you're really like the reason why you're here, dies.
I think you hit on something really important, and the curiosity is definitely one point, but the element to all of that I think is most important is not being able to ask a question. I think that is a very dangerous thing, and definitely gets me feeling a little bit more like my chest gets puffed up, and I'm not pleased with the situation like that. And I think one of the beautiful themes or threads that run through all the work I've ever done, professionally and personally, is questions are powerful, questions are necessary, and questions are actually what we seek to then get to the answer.
Yeah.
And any time that's not allowed, I kind of, raise a brow or two to that situation. How come I can't ask a question, or how come this question is off limits? Again, whether I'm speaking to my 7-year-old son, we always tell him, ask the question, say what you need to say. And it's up to your mother and I to come up with an age appropriate response. But the question is not the problem. The job is for us to come up with the age appropriate response. Yeah.
And so then I want to look at your 20%. And I get that that's definitely part of your soul, this idea of living off the grid with a bunch of animals. You are kind of, our Caesar Milan with, the dog whisperer, but with animals. So I get that connection. But I also really think, and you hit on it a little bit, is it comes from your fatigue. It comes from being part of a world where you can't ask questions and you can't find answers. And when you feel overwhelmed, your body shuts down. You're like, I just want to check out. And so, I mean, in a natural sequence, even in a most balanced life, we require rest and recovery, and we require doing things that aren't always on or in the work, as they say. But I think that sometimes when that happens to you, it's just your body saying you're overwhelmed. Like, you need to step back because it's too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm blessed to live in a place now where the beach is very accessible, and I can access it quite often, 2-3 times a week sometimes. And it really does bring me back. But yeah, I think also with the animal side of things, it's not just because they're cute and cuddly, and I love running around with animals, or dogs in particular. It's also because there is a psychology in training and that relationship that I'm very fascinated with as well. So if I'm very honest with the theme that runs through the 80% and the 20%, it does add up to 100, which is understanding beings, whether it's an animal or a human being or myself. It's just in a different lens, in a different environment, with a different end goal. So, the 100% of it is if we're not connected to ourselves and each other, then why are we doing the things we do? Like, what other point really is there?
But even I know you're going to be on that beach, even with those animals, even no humans, you're going to start questioning the animals. Like, why is it doing that way? What should I do this? And I can already see you, that natural state coming back.
Totally. And even like just jumping in the ocean with the waves, and I went down on my knees with my son and got at his level, and the waves look so much bigger. And then all of a sudden I started like questioning like his strength and his ability to like overcome the waves at that height. And meanwhile, here I am, a couple of feet taller than him, and like, oh, this is not really an issue. And so obviously, yes, it's kind of like my operating system. It will always come back to figuring out what's going on, why are we doing it this way, and can we do it better?
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about kind of, your academics or, your athletics and different things you did to get to this point. I kind of would love to know a little bit more about your path to becoming a naturopathic doctor, and then becoming what we are now, certified brain-based executive coaches. What led you? Why did you make these decisions? Like, what part of this curious soul that you were, made this become your path?
Yeah, I would have never imagined that I'd be here when I first started this journey. That's for sure. It just, I don't even think I knew about an executive coaching program when I first started my path in education. But it was always fueled by the curiosity of the body, the curiosity of the mind-body connection, understanding it. And that got me into kinesiology, sports medicine, again, performance, athletics, really fascinating areas. How do they being the athletes show up? How do they train? How do they prepare their minds and their bodies to do the things that they have to do? But as I went through sports medicine, got to interact with more athletes, got to, be the individual that runs on the field when someone gets injured, and kind of live out some of those ideas that I thought were really where I was headed, I realized I want to answer more of the medical question, not just the sports side of things. So that's when I started learning more about naturopathic medicine and got into medical school and did that work. When I graduated, again, I thought I'd open a general practice, but for one reason or another, I became even more interested in chronic ailments, cancer in particular. And so I started doing integrative cancer care. And through those conversations, I think is where I really started opening up my eyes to this question of like, how do we show up to what's hard? When I would sit with those patients, I would ask them a lot about, their ailment, of course, but also their psychological well-being, their social connection, their familial connections, and a lot of underlying themes, repetitive themes would be brought to light between many different patients. And that's when I started recognizing that there's more to this preventative side of things than just sitting in a clinic and having patients come to me. So, we'll probably at one point get into the story of you and I and how MindShift started. But it was essentially after 10 plus years of clinical work where I decided I wanted to focus on the work we're doing with MindShift solely and focus on the idea of helping individuals do the work they need to do within the workplace and also at home, because that's where we spend most of our time. And so if I'm sitting in a clinic waiting for people to get sick, I'm not really doing the preventative work that I thought I was doing. I might be doing great work helping the individuals get through some chronic ailments, but definitely not to the extent in which I thought I could if I just was able to step out of the clinic and step into people's lives in a more intimate way. And then finally, the last layer to this, as I was doing all of this work, I was also teaching health psychology at the local medical school. And I would constantly be asking my students a question, a thesis question, if you will, where I wanted them to come up with the answer. And the question was, what determines how each of us individually show up to life when faced with a challenge? And what are the supports? How can we empower these individuals to work through this process in a way that they feel connected to and they feel proud of? Again, coming from a chronic ailment, coming from an end of life care background, many times people did pass on, but we never, meaning me and the patients and their families, saw this as an ultimate failure. If we could work through the process as they were getting sick or as they were getting better, in a way that everyone felt connected to, everyone felt in charge and empowered with, and everyone felt like they were doing it on their terms, whatever that may have looked like. So I think that's really the long-winded way of how I ended up being here in executive coaching. But again, really just trying to help people connect to themselves first and foremost, and then to each other.
Okay, so two questions here. Number one is, how do you then use all of your clinical experience as an executive coach? Because the modalities are different, our powers, as executive coaches are different. You're also coming into people usually, in a business setting. We've worked with a variety from the spectrum of people on different parts of their life. But in general, most people come into leadership training at a business or entrepreneur level. So how do you bring those principles to a coaching scenario where they're like, we want to be more productive, or we don't get along, or etc.? Like, how do you use those principles that you would have used in clinic in a very different kind of lens and space, and bring those in these types of relationships?
Yeah, two major themes. One theme is that nothing works in isolation. Everything is in conjunction with something else. the integration of medicine is the integration of life. It's the integration of the body. It's the integration of the mind. It's integration of social circles. And in business, it's the integration of the variety of humans that work there. So I think the integrative mind was always part of the way I saw things, and definitely applies to how I do work now. And then more specifically from a modality standpoint, the foundation to all of the work we do and all of the work I did as a clinician is mental emotional strength building. It's the ability to be able, again, to take on the challenge, as we discussed, even as simple as technology not working and needing to shift the way that we see things, but being able to have the resources, the tools, the know-how to shift, to know how to take the hard stuff and make it different. It's really the basis of everything, and it's the basis of all communication. Again, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's so important: communication with ourselves, and then communications with the people around us. And so I think it's incredibly difficult to be a version of ourselves that we're proud of if we don't know how to do these things. It's incredibly difficult to accomplish the goals we want to accomplish in our lives if we don't have strong mental emotional foundations. And so everything I learned in very difficult situations, again, chronic ailments, suicide, pain, distress, breakups, the concept was the same: was how do we rebuild? How do we show up? How do we engage the best of ourselves so that we can do what we want to do despite the challenges that are ahead of us? How do we acknowledge that it is hard? How do we acknowledge what is in front of us and not deny it, and also work towards the betterment of the situation? And I think all of those skill sets are definitely something I use daily with the clients that we work with.
Yeah. I want to lean into kind of maybe a tangent, but something you mentioned as you were talking about your, clinical history. You had the privilege of working with people in end of life care, and and you've also had the real life experience, as we have talked about, on various platforms, and us personally is, this first ignited within us when we lost our grandmother. This whole concept and process of end of life care, beyond the grief that we process, but just the privilege to be with someone at the end of their life and what that looks like and what legacy means. And then more recently with the loss of our mother. And so we've seen grief and loss and end of life care from multiple angles, but you specifically from a clinician and then a son and a grandson. And, what does legacy look like from this lens now that you see it? We come with people with really big goals, and we always have this concept of what legacy actually is. What's your perspective? Because you've had the privilege of sharing these intimate moments. Like, what matters really after it's all gone from your perspective?
Such an incredible question. Such a powerful question. I have a friend of mine, a close friend, who is very, very, very much aware of the idea of legacy, and he is building a legacy in the way he sees fit. And I start with that little connection just to say that legacy is individual. I really think, somebody wants a statue in their name, 50 years down the line for their great grandson or daughter to recognize them. Somebody that's not even anything close to what they care about. And so I think first and foremost, it's individual, like many things. For me, legacy has to start with the day to day to day, the mundane, because it's the mundane that builds the relationship. It's the mundane that builds the connection with the individual or individuals that you actually want to leave a legacy for. If a legacy is only meant to serve some sort of weird ego that you no longer have because you are dead now, then that's just a present day ego that you're trying to fulfill and scared of letting go of when you're no longer here. And that to me is not how I would like to build legacy. Of course, there are certain comforts I would love to afford my family from the hard work that I accomplish. But more than all of that, there's a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, and a sense of love that I want my family members and the individuals that I touch in my day-to-day work to remember me by. And not only just because it's important for me, but because that awakens something within them. And that is the ripple effect to then they show up as a version of themselves to do the same for somebody else. And it's only then that we actually create a legacy that is worth living, again, in my opinion, because you are not taking anything with you when you die. And if you want people to remember you based on a statue, then again, I think that's half the battle. It's for me, it's the ego battle. If I really want people to remember me, I want them to remember by how I inspired them, by how I connected with them, and how they became a version of themselves that they're proud of because they happened to run along, my path for a minute or, maybe 100 years.
Thank you. Let's think, as a mind shift coach, what do you think you bring as your secret sauce, or what's your mind shift superpower?
I think my superpower, and this was maybe told to me more than I discovered it, and maybe that's where superpowers sometimes come from, or many times can come from, is
How people see you.
yeah, it's just how you kind of show up without trying to show up.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, consistently you're getting the same type of feedback. And the feedback that I've most often gotten from friends, family, to patients, to clients, to whatever, is they joke that there's like a tattoo on my forehead that says, tell me all your problems. Um, and I,
It's
and
true. That is an effect you have on people.
yeah. And I think it comes because, again, it goes back to where we started. I'm curious. I
Yeah.
care. If you're interested in your own story, if you're interested in the work you do, I become interested in you. And so I will listen. I probably will share my opinions when appropriate, hopefully, but I probably will share my opinions. And the idea around that makes it a superpower is I think people feel a sense of comfort. And that comfort and that support to be able to be who they are is something different for a lot of individuals. I don't know, everyone's story, but I know a lot of people who have spoken to me said, I haven't told anyone this before, or this is something that it's the first time I'm sharing out loud, or something along those lines, which really means the space that we hold between us is safe enough and sacred enough and powerful enough for you willing to dive into a part of you that you want to explore. And if there's ever a mind shift power, it would be that, to allow that space to emerge between myself and the people that I'm engaging with.
And I think you said it, and I think it needs to be restated, is yes, it's not, of course, your curiosity is, the fuel, but really the reason why people come to you and you have that ability to connect, and, this idea of this tattoo, tell me all your problems, it comes from a sense of safety. And I think that's critical. People need to feel safe. We provide safer spaces. We call it safer spaces. The concept of a safer space is because there's no such thing as a safe space, right? We can't make 100% guarantee. So we do our best that we provide safer spaces. But what that means is we're providing a place where someone can be heard without judgment, with compassion, and with, the support and to grow. But that only happens with that connection piece that you provide. This tell me all your problems tattoo is because they feel safe enough energetically with you to say, I can do this. I can finally be seen. I can finally be heard. Like, that is the truest gift we can give another person.
When I'm at my best, that's definitely, I feel like it's the truth. And it reminds me of a story about, I don't know exactly the title, but it was like a master meditator, a monk, someone who's dedicated their lives to meditation. And they were asked, are you always in a state of meditation? And the teacher answered, she said, no, when I'm on an airplane, I have my headphones on and I don't want anyone to bother me. I just kind of want to be in my own world, listening to my music or my podcast or whatever. And I loved that answer, because we have these ideas that just, if you are good at something, you have to be 100% that thing all the time. And that's not true. And this beautiful soul who dedicated their lives to meditating, and she also just wants to be left alone to be able to listen to whatever she's listening to, or take a nap or whatever. She's not always connected to everything around her. But when it is called for, then she has the tools, she has the process, and she's empowering herself and the people around her to feel that connection. And that's really what I hope for myself.
Yeah.
as well.
And it goes back to your first answer. Yours was the 80-20 rule. That's how your body and your balance was maintained. And it goes back to a course we used to teach, but hopefully we bring it back online soon, which is one of my favorites. It's our creativity course. But we talked about all of us having kind of, a soundboard where we're like mixing, the bass goes this way. I don't know enough terms, Yashar. You're going to have to help me with my metaphor, but like we're mixing to have the right sound come through, and everyone's it's going to sound a little different. So yours is 80-20. In some ways, like I might be the complete reverse. Like 80% I need to be quiet, not talking to anybody, and 20% I come in all in. I'm on this podcast, I'm sharing my voice, but my balance is probably literally the inverse of your balance. And it's really part of this journey that we have with ourselves and our clients is, what is that for you? Like this blueprint is really your blueprint, not ours. And so I think the discovery of that and the awareness piece of that is critical for any type of growth, healing, and etc.
Yeah, totally. And then it comes to, and this is not the point of this podcast, we'll definitely be talking about on many others, but I think where conflict comes up is where I want the 80% bass and you want the 20% a bass, or I want the 80% treble and you want the 20% treble. Again, just trying to use your metaphor and go with it, where it's like we need to come to a creative understanding of how you and I are going to produce the best music, to go with that metaphor, knowing that we actually crave different things.
And we create differently.
And and so part of this is really just recognizing how, again, to get to that middle ground of understanding, which everything, we're chasing our tail here, which I always see as a great conversation, is it won't ever come to fruition if I can't ask the question, or if I can't say, hey, but I thought we can do it this way or that way. Why are you having trouble with that? And to do that in a respectful manner and to do that in a non-confrontational manner is a skill set that, unfortunately, I don't think many people have been taught and or have practiced. And so that's part of the design here too, is to be able to get to that place, again, even with yourself. So you're not belittling yourself all the time, to understand what's next and how to do it better.
So we talked a little bit about this toolbox. We're going to be talking about toolbox probably throughout every episode, but part of this toolbox, what is a tool in our toolbox that, our clients get, we use, etc., that you find is like underestimated, or it's an extremely powerful tool that can really help people, shift, as we call it?
Yeah, one of them we already talked about, and it's just, I have this saying, let's make questions cool again. And I remember you saying, like, when were questions not cool? And I think that comes from people who love asking questions. But I think people are always very interested in a guru and in an answer. And so I think,
I see that. Okay.
Yeah. So I think someone who can appreciate a good question is someone that probably does work with us. But I would say that would be a tool. It'd be a question, a good question, based on what I'm hearing from the storyline, but then followed with a comfortable amount, and maybe an uncomfortable amount of silence. It depends on, I guess, how your relationship with silence is. Yeah.
I'm like, silence, give it to me. Somebody else is like, never.
Yeah. How come you're not filling this gap with more words?
With noise.
And so I think at the end of the day, the tool is simple. It's a good question followed with a level of silence that allows the individual to think. And I've had clients say to me, oh, I haven't thought of that before. And I say, that's okay. We have plenty of time. Let's start thinking about it now. And that's where you see the wheels turning for these people who are willing to do the work.
Yeah. And hopefully in later podcasts, we'll talk about, this question a little bit deeper, because it is that spark of even asking a question that you have never been asked before does something. It's the first inkling of the shift that we were talking about, throughout our work. So a little bit of background for those that don't know: if you work with us one-on-one, in our executive coaching relationship, you work with Yashar first and then me. You don't see me till later. The one-on-one kind of bundle we have is 5 with Yashar, then with me. And so you are in charge, Yashar, you get them first, and you are in charge of what we call our mental, emotional strength building side of the coaching. It's our first step. It's our foundational step. Can you tell us a little bit about why it's important, why it's our foundation, why they have to go through you before they get to me.
Yeah. We touched on it a little bit when you asked me about what I learned as a clinician and how I bring it to the work we do now. I think to expand upon it a little bit, it would say simply, we start by you understanding yourself first. We say you have to lead yourself before you have the privilege of leading others. And to be able to lead self,
Can you say that part again for the people in the back seats?
you have to be able to lead yourself before you have the privilege of leading others.
Okay.
And to lead oneself, whether as a parent, as a sibling, as a neighbor, all the way to, you want to talk about athletics, you want to talk about, being in a powerful position at work and business, all of it in our eyes is leadership, because you're showing up as the version of you that is regulated, that is clear, that is understood within yourself, and then leaving room for the conversation and the people around you to kind of do the same and to come to a conclusion of how to take the best step forward. I think part of being a leader is also definitely being vulnerable, knowing how to show your vulnerability, knowing how to talk about the areas of weakness and the areas of strength. And you can't do any of that work if you haven't taken the time and the space to learn about yourself and to learn about the mental, emotional, strength building principles that are grounded in science, the mind-body connection principles that are grounded in science that help you get there. Once you work with me, my goal is for you to have not just a toolbox, but also a compass, and to know how to use it, when to use it, and what direction to use it in, so that when, again, life happens, when business happens, when things get hard, you can reach back into yourself and have answers. Your questions are not now met with silence of confusion all the time, but you have more answers from yourself based on the activities that we've done together, but also based on all the activities you've done in your own life. And so that you're able to then move forward in a much more practical way, and a much more, I think, also appreciative way. And so none of that is possible without doing the mental, emotional groundwork, so that you can recognize what the triggers are and recognize what the tools are to work through it.
I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but do you have a favorite type of client? One that you feel most aligned to work with?
Yeah, the ones that are willing to do the work. It's really simple. I don't care what your background story is. I don't care what you haven't or have accomplished in your mind. I don't care how much money you have or haven't made. None of these things really matter to me one bit. The only thing that matters to me, and I can tell pretty quickly, is if we go into the work, if we get beyond the superficial, if we are asking questions of value for you. For example, again, where we start is, who are you? What are the values and the principles that guide who you are? And you're willing to do that work, then you're my favorite type of client. Because to me, you're saying that you're willing to do the hard things so that they feel easier, and so that you can evolve, so that you can evolve to the version of you that you're capable of becoming. That's all that matters. And all of us are at a different chapter in this book of life. And sometimes we have to kind of recognize that we may be really excellent and far advanced in certain books, but in the series of life, we haven't read other books. And so we have to humble thyself to be able to learn what we need to learn to then get better at the things we want to get better at. And people who are able to do that, I think, just not only accomplish a lot more, but thesis of everything I do, are able then to connect with the people around them in a much more fruitful manner. And like I said, that's if there ever was a legacy, that would be it.
So we're time to close this podcast for episode, Yashar. What's one piece of advice you would give someone? If you could only give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah. This is something I had to learn along the way. And it simply is, not everyone's going to understand you. And that truly is okay as long as you take the time to understand yourself. Many people, including myself, can get trapped in the idea of external validation. And that could be a slippery slope and a dangerous one at that. And we have to figure out ways in our own minds, in our own hearts, to increase the signal to noise ratio. There's a lot of noise, and we have to increase the signal and understand what it is that I'm looking for in my life, who it is that I'm trying to become. And if I was going to say comfortable, maybe you won't be comfortable, but if you are at peace with that version of you, and you really think it's the version of you that's going to be the most beneficial for the life you're trying to lead, then other people's opinions are a dime a dozen, and you have to kind of leave it at that. If someone is very close to you and you have a lot of trust, and they've demonstrated that they are worthy of your trust repeatedly, and they have ideas and comments and feedback for you, then I would say, okay, work with that. But at the same time, don't make that your truth at the beginning. Sit with it, marinate on it, and think about it, because it's incredibly disruptive to your mentality to take other people's opinions on at face value all the time without integrating it into your own understanding of yourself and your life and the path that you're on. And I think if you want true peace and true fulfillment in life, you have to be able to be at peace with yourself and the version of you that you are working towards and currently living as. And that's where I would leave it.
I love it. So we're going to end on a more maybe humorous note, depending on what your answer is. We'll see. We're obviously brother and sister team. We obviously run a business together. We actually have the privilege of working with a lot of family businesses, I think, because we also understand what it's like. Tell me what it's like working with your sister, AKA moi. What's it like working with me? What is this journey like to have a family business?
Yeah, my answer is actually not that funny at all.
Okay.
I think I've ruined the punchline there. But it's simple. I say this all the time. If you, Isla, were not my sister, I would want you to be within the business or any business that I was running. There's an intelligence and intuitive nature about you that I constantly learn from. And so it's nice to have that kind of in the family. It's nice to have that in the business. But I think you being my sister was not the first, if in fact probably was the last reason why we even got into business together.
That's why we probably avoided it.
Yeah, we avoided it for years. I think it's the character traits that you bring and the background professionally and personally that you bring that allow me to grow and the business to grow, and for me to grow. That is what I cherish the most. And again, you're the yin to the yang, right? It's a nice balance for us.
Well, I appreciate it. It's a privilege for me as well. And thank you for listening to this podcast all about Yashar. Feel free to slide into his DMs and ask him more questions, or into ours. We're happy and always ready to answer your questions, to give you more insight on us and the shift and what it is to, do better by thinking better, as we say. Anything before we close, Yash?
No, thank you. That was fun. I hope someone, whoever was listening, and if you made it to the end, congratulations. I hope you got something out of it.
Until next time. Thank you for listening, friends. What shifted for you during this episode? We'd love to hear your insights. Write us with any questions, commentary, or episode ideas at theshift@mindshiftleadership.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, we would deeply appreciate a like and subscribe.
The Shift is brought to you by MindShift Leadership, a heart-centered, evidence-based, mindset-powered leadership company, empowering you with the training to prioritize mental health, inclusion, and performance optimization.